Hi guys, Nemesis Springer here of Shins of the Wreckers Customs. I'm usually a Transformer collector, but I've been on a bit of a Gobots sabbatical recently. And you might know these guys as the Gobots, but if you're not from America, you might know these guys as Robo Machine or even as Machine Men. Now, I've been on a bit of a rabbit hole finding out why these were called different names in different countries. So I'm just going to share that sort of history with you here. And then I'm going to do some videos reviewing each figure and sort of look at the differences for the Robo Machine version compared to the American Gobots version, and talk about some of the Japanese versions and things like that as well. So you can see we got this weird sort of branding in Europe, in the UK, of Robo Machine featuring the Gobots. Okay, so I'll go into that in a bit. Okie dokie, so they all sort of started out as a Bandai line in Japan by their subsidiary company called Popey, who you might know for doing Chogokin, which is sort of big super robots like Voltron, which Matchbox later licensed, and stuff like that. So they were actually named, Chogokin was named after like a legendary alloy from Mazinger, I believe. And actually each Machine Robo figure has Gokin stamped on it, because they've got die-cast parts, they've got metal parts. So these you might know as the regular Gobots. In Japan they were known as the 600 series because they cost 600 yen. One of the really interesting things about them as well is apparently children voted or could sort of suggest the alt modes. So the alt modes were picked by kids. Now I'm not sure how they did that. I can't find any information about how the mechanics of that happened. So if anyone's got any information on that, that'd be really appreciated. Whether it's a poll or a writing or something, how they sort of picked them. But they were chosen by children, what they turned into. They were really successful in Japan. They sold by the millions. I think the big thing in Japan as well is they don't sort of need accompanying fiction or a show to sell cool robot toys at the time, and this is in 1982. One thing to note as well is in Japan, Turbo over there, the red car guy, wasn't part of the initial six. Sorry, it was this guy, which is Highway Robo, but he was taken out for the initial Western test. So these were the test market 6. To see if they could sell in different locations. In Japan, they were seen as sort of palleted mechs. I think they said that rather than being living robots. And yeah, they said they didn't have fiction other than they had little packing comics where they fought the alien bad guys. One interesting thing on there is they all have an MR number, Machine Robo number, stamped onto them. So MR1, MR2, MR3, MR4, MR5, and then this is MR7 because this guy is MR6, sorry. So bit of a weird one, all the Gobots, that there'll be some missing sometimes because of that reason, because they were missed out of the Western release, which is an odd one because later on in the line they would put in some prototypes that Japan in the Western releases that Japan never released, but yeah, they didn't go back and put in some of the other vehicles. So I think it was just seen that like transport. One of the little ones later is a bus. It was seen as boring, possibly. And some Shinkansens and things like that were left out because it was like, well, children won't know what a bullet train is in Western countries. Maybe they won't have seen them. So anyway, yeah, in Europe and the UK, they were known as Robo Machine, and in Australia, were known as Machine Men or Robot Machine Men. So what happened is they tested it. Bandai tested him in all those markets. So they were actually released in America and Canada as Robot Machine Men. These initial 6. They released in the UK as Robo Machine, and they released in Australia as Machine Men. Sorry, as in UK and Europe as Robo Machine. Now, they're apparently successful in all markets, but Bandai US, for some strange reason, decided they wanted to focus on solar-powered games, solar-powered handheld games. That's from the Toys That Built America documentary, which I really suggest if you want to find out more about it, and probably better than I could explain, but it is paywalled and it is only in certain areas you can watch the documentary, but I do definitely recommend it. So Bandai decided to not go forward with it in Bandai US in America, but the other areas decided to go forward with it, and so it was Bandai then running the line in Europe, the line in Australia, and they just released Machine Robo, but called them Robo Machine or Machine Men. So in America, like Takara, similarly, Takara tried to do Diachron in America, and it didn't sort of take off. Because it seems to be the case that American children needed media or a cartoon to sort of sell the toys. Then comes in Tonka. So they'd sort of poached from Mattel, apparently 4 executives. I've got 2 names here, Jerry Cleary and Raymond McDonald. And apparently they were raiding through Knickerbocker, who'd just gone out of businesses, bins, and they found a knockoff plastic transforming car. They thought it was inferior quality, and they wanted to get something which was metal and hard wearing, which Tonka was known for, and they then came across the Robot Machine Men from somebody who'd previously worked for Bandai US, and the rest is history. That then became the Gobots. It's interesting that these previous Mattel employees, having worked on Masters of the Universe, would then go on to work on Gobots, and you look at some of the names, the sort of goofy names like Copter, Psykill, Phytor, they're similar to those sort of goofy names that Master of the Universe characters have, like Fisto or Ram Man and things like that. They're quite similar, really. It was the best-selling toy of the year in America in 1983, and it sold more than Master of the Universe ever sold, which I think in a year. I think is interesting because people sort of think of Gobots as a failed line, but actually it did really well in those 1983, 4, those first few years. So, Robo Machine then, as I showed you, we sort of got weird storybooks had this thing of Robo Machine featuring the Gobots, and the initial packaging for the line had Robo Machine on it, but then would also go on to have Gobots on there as well. It went on longer for the US, the line, and would go on to include extra figures like the Combinators, which are sort of like the Duocons of Robo Machine or Gobots or whatever. But then there was some exceptions. There was some times where they would miss out some figures. It was really successful in France, in particular, and went on to them to get the Revenge of Kronos, which was the Japanese anime, which came out in 1986. People seem to get confused and think it came out first before the Gobots cartoon. It didn't. It came out towards the end in 1986, after Gobots have been successful in the West. But France actually got that dubbed afterwards as Revenge de Gobot, which is interesting because nowhere else really other than Japan got that series. Robo Machines didn't get all the original figures, so some of the American figures didn't come out. Interesting, some of the stickers, I've not got an example here, swapped the MR of Machine Robo over to RM for Robo Machine, which is interesting. There was also a reboot line, and this was in 92 to 93, only in... It was only in Europe. I think it definitely was in the UK, but it might have been in a couple of other territories. It was only in Europe. They're sometimes seen as by collectors of having inferior quality, although I can't speak for that. All might have been pretty decent. But they definitely were produced in a different factory and produced in China instead. There was some interesting licensing issues in that time because Hasbro had bought Tonka, so they owned all the Gobot names. So they had to change all the names for the 1992 line, and also all the licensed cars, because then you had to get it licensed, rather than back in the day where it was seen as free publicity. You just say to them, "Oh, we want to produce a toy car of your car." You then had to pay a licensing fee, so they renamed them. So, for instance, Porsche Robo, which is Crasher, was renamed Sports Car, and things like that. But I hope that's been interesting. I'll put some links in the description of my sort of sources and things, and I hope you will watch when we sort of look at each individual figure and compare it to the other versions.